Hello and welcome back to The Way Back. Our journey begins in the late 19th and early 20th century, a time of great tension and rivalry between world powers. The world was a chessboard, and the kings and queens were ready to make their moves. The political landscape was a tangled web of alliances, nationalism and militarism, each thread interwoven with the next, creating a complex tapestry of international relations. In one corner of the globe we had the Triple Entente, an alliance of France, Russia and the United Kingdom. Three powerful nations bound by diplomatic agreements. They stood in opposition to the central powers of Germany and Austria-Hungary, who were later joined by the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria. These alliances were not just about friendship, they were strategic moves designed to balance the scales of power. Nationalism, a deep-rooted love for one's country, was a potent force that could unite or divide. It inspired loyalty and patriotism, but it also ignited conflict. Nations were eager to assert their dominance, their right to be recognized as a world power. This fervor was particularly strong in the Balkans, where Slavic people yearned for independence from Austro-Hungarian rule. Militarism, the belief in maintaining a strong military capability, was another significant factor. The world powers were locked in an arms race, each trying to outdo the other in terms of military strength. This competition created an atmosphere of distrust and fear, a powder keg waiting for a spark. And that spark came in the form of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in June of 1914. This event, carried out by a Serbian nationalist, set off a chain reaction of events. The intricate web of alliances was activated, and nations began to mobilize their troops. Thus, the stage was set for the first great global conflict of the 20th century, World War I. The year is 1914 and the world is thrust into the chaos of war. Welcome to the year of our Lord, 1914, a year that would see the world dive headfirst into a conflict of unprecedented scale, a tumultuous period that would become known as the First World War. The nations of the world found themselves locked in a deadly dance, each trying to outmaneuver the other, each trying to gain the upper hand in a war that was quickly spiraling out of control. The first significant battle was the First Battle of Marne. This confrontation saw the French and British armies halt the seemingly unstoppable German advance into France. It set the stage for a grueling 4-year-long conflict, full of blood, sweat and tears. Next, we have the Battle of Verdun, one of the longest and most devastating battles in human history. The German High Command sought to bleed France white, and they nearly succeeded. Over the course of 10 months, the French and Germans traded blows, with neither side willing to give an inch. Then came the Battle of Somme. This was a battle characterized by its sheer scale and the unimaginable loss of life. The British Army suffered its worst single-day loss in history, with nearly 60,000 casualties on the first day alone. The battle would drag on for months, becoming a symbol of the futile and indiscriminate slaughter of the war. Lastly, we have the Battle of Passchendaele, a battle that embodied the true horrors of trench warfare. The unending rain, the omnipresent mud, and the relentless artillery barrages created a hellscape that the men at the front had to endure day in, day out. These battles, among others, painted a grim picture of the war, a war that was supposed to be over by Christmas of 1914. But it would rage on for another 4 years, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The war ended in 1918, leaving millions dead and the world forever changed. In the aftermath of the Great War, the world hoped for lasting peace. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was seen as a beacon of hope, a promise to prevent another widespread conflict. It sought to establish a just and lasting peace by punishing Germany and setting up the League of Nations. Yet this period, often referred to as the interwar years, was far from peaceful. The world was left grappling with political instability and economic turmoil. The punitive measures imposed on Germany led to resentment and economic hardship, creating fertile ground for the rise of extremism. Meanwhile, the League of Nations, despite its noble intentions, struggled to maintain international peace and prevent aggression. It was a time of great tension and uncertainty, with the world teetering on the brink of another global conflict. However, the seeds of another great conflict were already being sown. In 1939, the world once again found itself on the brink of war. A mere 2 decades after the end of the war to end all wars, international tensions had reached a boiling point. The ever-growing Nazi Germany, under the iron fist of Adolf Hitler, set its sights on Poland, igniting the fuse of the Second World War. This initial invasion of Poland was a brutal display of the Nazis' blitzkrieg strategy, a term meaning lightning war. It was a swift and devastating form of warfare, designed to shock and disorient the enemy. Poland fell quickly under the onslaught, and the world watched in trepidation as Hitler's forces continued their march across Europe. Soon, France found itself in the crosshairs. Despite the formidable Maginot Line, a series of fortifications along the French-German border, the Nazis bypassed this defense with a daring invasion through the Ardennes forest. The French, caught off guard, were unable to mount a successful defense, and Paris fell to the Nazis in June 1940. However, the invasions of Poland and France were just the opening acts of this global conflict. The Battle of Britain was the Nazis' first major setback. The British Royal Air Force, or RAF, proved to be a formidable opponent for the German Luftwaffe. Despite being heavily outnumbered, the RAF successfully defended Britain's skies, marking a turning point in the war and proving that the Nazis were not invincible. In the midst of these early stages of the war, alliances were being formed and battle lines were being drawn. The United States, initially determined to remain neutral, found it increasingly difficult to ignore the global conflict. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 ultimately propelled the United States into the fray. The world was now fully embroiled in the Second World War. The stage was set for some of the most significant and memorable battles in human history. Battles that would determine the fate of nations and shape the world as we know it today. The war raged on, with key battles shifting the course of history. As the Axis powers pushed their agendas, resistance was mounting, and it was in the chilling depths of winter in Stalingrad where the tide began to turn. The Battle of Stalingrad, one of the bloodiest confrontations in history, was a pivotal moment in the Second World War. The Soviet Union's successful defense of the city marked a turning point, putting the German forces on the back foot for the first time. But while the Eastern Front was freezing, the Pacific was heating up. The Battle of Midway, fought in the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, was another pivotal moment. The United States, despite being outnumbered, managed to successfully repel the Japanese fleet. The victory at Midway was a significant blow to Japan and marked the beginning of a series of defeats that would eventually lead to their surrender. Yet, it was not just in the distant lands of Russia and the Pacific where the war was being won. The Western Front too saw decisive action. The D-Day invasion, the largest seaborne invasion in history, marked the start of the end for Hitler's reign. Thousands of Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, and despite heavy losses, they established a foothold in Nazi-occupied Europe. From there, they began the long, hard push towards Berlin. Each of these battles, fought in different corners of the globe, played a crucial role in turning the tide of the war. They showcased the resilience, the courage, and the determination of the Allied forces. The soldiers who fought in these battles, whether in the frosty ruins of Stalingrad, on the vast ocean expanse of Midway, or on the bloody beaches of Normandy, were part of a global effort to resist tyranny and oppression. By 1945, after years of bloodshed, the Allies emerged victorious. The sacrifices made in these key battles were not in vain, their results echoing throughout history, reminding us of the cost of freedom and the price of peace. The end of the war marked the beginning of a new global order. The world, once divided by borders of hostility, found itself on the precipice of an era where unity and collaboration were the keys to survival. As the dust settled, nations sought to mend the wounds of war. Countries and their leaders lifted their gaze from the battlefields and turned their attention towards peace and rebuilding. The aftermath of the war was a time of reconstruction, both of cities and societies. It was a time when nations, scarred by the ravages of war, began to rise from the ashes, driven by the hope of a brighter future. In the pursuit of lasting peace, the United Nations was born. An organization founded on the principle of collective security, it aimed to prevent such colossal conflicts from ever happening again. Nations, large and small, joined hands under the banner of the United Nations, pledging to resolve disputes through dialogue and negotiation rather than resorting to arms. Yet even as the world strived for unity, new divides began to form. The world was no longer split by the trenches of war, but by ideological differences. The United States and the Soviet Union, two superpowers that had fought side by side against a common enemy, found themselves at odds in what would become known as the Cold War. This new conflict was not fought with bullets and bombs, but with words and ideologies, marking a shift in the nature of global conflict. The legacy of the World Wars is more than just a chapter in history books. It is a testament to the resilience of nations, the courage of individuals, and the collective will of humanity to rise above conflict and strive for peace. These wars shape the world we live in today, their lessons forever etched in history. In our brief journey, we've traversed the tumultuous landscapes of the First and Second World Wars. We've journeyed into the abyss of the Great War, ignited by a spark in Sarajevo that set the world ablaze. We've witnessed the entangled alliances and rivalries and the brutal trench warfare that defined a new and terrifying era of conflict. Key battles such as the Somme and Verdun etched their names into history, taking millions of lives in the process. The war to end all wars, it was optimistically called, yet it laid the groundwork for an even greater conflagration. We've then journeyed through a brief respite, a period of uneasy peace and simmering tensions. The Treaty of Versailles, intended to ensure peace, ironically sowed the seeds of another global conflict. This led us into the dark heart of the Second World War, a conflict of unprecedented scale and destruction. We've seen how the storm clouds gathered over Europe, Asia, and eventually the entire globe. We've retraced the paths of decisive battles such as Stalingrad and Midway that turned the tide of the war. The horrific toll of human lives, the Holocaust, the dawn of the nuclear age with the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These are etched into our collective memory. The aftermath of these wars reshaped our world, from the emergence of superpowers to the creation of the United Nations. The legacy of these conflicts continues to reverberate through the corridors of time, a poignant reminder of the human capacity for both destruction and resilience. Our foray into the past is not just an exercise in remembrance, but also a beacon for the future. The lessons from these wars serve as a stark warning against the horrors of global conflict. As we remember those who lived, fought, and died in these wars, may we strive for a world where such conflicts are a thing of the past. Thanks for watching. See you again next time. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon.